Welcome to Miss.sheeena's world. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Me and my dad conspired to get his wedding canceled, and I didn't care about it back then, but 30-year-old me is looking at it like, okay, that was a little bit crazy. It's March 2016, and I'm in tech school for the Air Force. My dad's wedding is scheduled to be like the week after I graduate tech school in April. So my dad calls me and he's just like, hey man, like our wedding's supposed to be this day. I don't really want it to be this day anymore. Like I need it canceled. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to call my fiance crying and tell her that you just failed your last test in tech school, so you can't come home and you have to stay there longer. If you do that, we'll have to push the wedding back because I'm not getting married without you there, and she won't expect me to get married without you there. So the whole wedding will just be pushed off and I'll just never reschedule it. So I'm like, oh yeah, of course. Like I love fake crying. I'll do this. I'll do anything for my dad. Like my dad asked me, like, of course. So I call her and I put on my best performance, y'all. Like I should have won an Oscar for the way I was fake crying on here, telling her how I failed this test. And my first job in the Air Force was an air traffic controller. Eventually I passed tech school, but I'll get to that at the end of the story. My first job in the Air Force was an air traffic controller. If you know anything about air traffic control, like this shit is hard. So the concept of me failing the test was not like a big deal. Like it was not unheard of. Anyway, I called her. I told her I failed this test. And she's like, don't worry. I'm like, I feel so bad because you already have the wedding planned. Like, what are we going to do? Blah, blah, blah. She's like, don't worry about it. We'll find a better day that works for everybody. Long story short, that wedding never got rescheduled. And my dad is not with that lady to this day. To be honest, I already knew what was tea when I found out that he got engaged via Instagram to begin with. Why the same week after I lied about failing this test so that the wedding could get canceled, I actually failed a test and had to get pushed back a week in tech school? Looking back on it, like the fact that I was 19 years old and I just helped my daddy call off his whole wedding because he didn't feel like doing it anymore, it's a little sick. I'm not gonna lie, it's a little sick.
Okay, story time about how I almost got married when I was 15 years old. So, I've been getting a lot of requests for like more details about like me and Chris like when we were younger. So I figured like this would be a good story time and also kind of show the pivot of our relationship. So boom, me and Chris met at Hamilton Township High School. That was the school that he had been going to, but I was going to South High School. South High School is like my home school. I'm from the South Side of Columbus, 22nd, if you know anything about the South Side. But anyways, I was going to South High School, and like I was getting into some little bit of trouble, so I ended up moving in with my aunt, and she lived in she lived in the school district of Hamilton Township. So that's how I ended up going to that school, and me and Chris. So I was a freshman and he was a senior. And mind you, not only was I a freshman, but I was like the new girl. And I had tattoos. Like I think I got my first tattoo when I was like 12. I got like REL tattoo right here. I don't know if you remember a tattoo artist called Chicken in Columbus. He did like everybody's beginner tattoos. But anyway, I think I had 2 tattoos at this point. And so, I was a freshman, I was a new girl, I had these tattoos, and I was cute, all types of stuff. So people was like, okay, who this girl is or whatever. So, all the guys was like, putting their bids in or whatever. So Chris had approached me in the hallway one day and he was like, hey, where'd you get your tattoos? And I just rolled my eyes because I just got so tired of the tattoo questions. Like, okay, it's only so many I'm going to answer after so long. So, and I think like later on in the day, people was like, oh, Chris said you curved him, da da da. And I'm like, I did not curve him. Like, so I think that's how we ended up talking. And then like once we started talking, like obviously we clicked and we was kind of like inseparable after that moment. But so I was a freshman and he was a senior, and I was 14 and he was 17. Now I know the age gap sounds kind of crazy, but it's like I feel like when people are in the same proximity, like when you go to school together, y'all peers. So with him being a senior, he was graduating and I would still be in high school. I ended up getting pregnant, and he was going away. He went to the military and he did boot camp. And then when he got back from boot camp, that's when we decided, okay, like we need to get married because I want to be able to go with him to duty stations and, have health care for me and Charlie, all these things. And so we started looking into like how does a minor, get married. And we were both still minors at this time because Chris went to boot camp when he was 17. So we looked it up and we talked to, our peoples about it. So my mom ended up taking us down to the courthouse to get married. And I guess like the process of all that was as long as your parents sign for it, and the judge signs off on it, you can get married. So we go down to the courthouse or whatever, and I'm big and pregnant. And we're talking to the clerk about, what we want to do. They're like, okay, well, we're going to run it by the judge. So we're going to have you guys sit in this room. And, we'll let you know, like, what the judge says. So I don't know if you guys remember the 270 sniper in Columbus. It was like a big deal or whatever. And this is what was going on at the time. It was like a person who was sitting, picking cars off the highway, just shooting at them. Like, it was just like a crazy situation. So the person came back and was like, yeah, they just caught the 270 sniper. Like, the judge isn't even going to hear this today. Like, we got all this type of stuff going on. So I was like devastated, like, dang, like, because he had to leave, After he went to boot camp in Georgia and Fort Benning, he was being stationed in Seoul, South Korea. And if I was married or not, I couldn't go over there. But, still, we just wanted to be married. We wanted to, like, solidify our family. So I was just kind of, like, devastated. And but I'm like, okay, so cool, we'll figure it out, as you come back or whatever the case. But, yeah, crazy tidbit as well about the 270 sniper. Come to find out, the neighborhood that me and Chris lived in, the 270 sniper was a couple doors down, which was so crazy to me because, like, this was something that impacted the whole Columbus. Then we couldn't get married because of it, and then come to find out this motherfucker was living a couple doors down. I don't know, crazy. Either way, so he ends up going off to Korea, and I think that's when the divide kind of started happening, because I told you guys, like, we were off and on since high school. But I think, like, once he went off to the military and, like, he was in the real world, like, he would tell me about comments people would make about, like, our age, because think about it, we was 14, 17, then 15, 18, then 16, 19, then 17 and 20. It was like, I think it made him uncomfortable, like, what people thought about our age gap. And at that point, we weren't peers anymore. We weren't in the same proximity. So I think that kind of, like, started, like, the divide, like, started to where we were, like, starting to break up. And I was devastated, and I still really wanted to be with him. And I think he really wanted to be with me, but it's just the age thing was just eating him up. But neither here nor there. So he was in South Korea for 8 months, and then he was supposed to be there for a year. He was there for 8 months, and they're like, yeah, we're at war, so forget about Korea. We're sending you to Iraq for a year. So this was, like, his first tour in Iraq. But they gave him 2 weeks leave to come home before they deploy him. So he came home for his 2 weeks, and, regardless of, like, what we was going through, obviously we just still loved each other, and I ended up getting pregnant with my daughter, Dylan. And after that, yeah, he was deployed to Iraq, and here I was, 17, with 2 kids. And that just kind of puts you into the pivot of my story of, like, everything that happened while we were off and on. But neither here nor there. This was a story time about how I almost got married at 15. Crazy story, but I'm excited to share everything that happened in between, because actually me and my daughter are working on a documentary, and I'm excited to share that with you guys. But yeah, that's that.
Okay, another story time on how I almost got into forced marriage. So I was 16 years old, right? This man, for some reason, wanted to marry me, was in his 20s. I would say like 25 or older. He might even be 30, I don't know. And he was so delusional. He's the king. He's the CEO of delusion. He thought I was in love with him too. The reason why he was so delulu is he thought, okay, you know what, I'm shy. You know how females be like, no, I don't. Back then, even though they like the guy, they're like, no, that's what he thought. But that was not the reason, boo-boo. I just didn't want you at all. So he asked my dad for my hand in marriage, right? So my dad said, no, she's too young. She's still in school. You need to wait. So apparently, there's this cultural thing in Oromo. Please, if you're Oromo and you heard of it, let me know. If a guy wants to marry the girl, right, and the dad refuses, he can forcefully marry her by bringing the elderly, and the elderly will force the dad's hand to marry the girl. So one day, my dad was not home. Knock on the door came. Tell me why this man is in a suit as if he's about to get married, and the elderly behind him. My mom is freaking out, so I said, hey, let us in, They're calling my mom's name, and they say, let us in. And then my mom said, wait, telling them that, like, my dad is not home, And they were like, no, it's okay, we'll wait for him. My mom refused. You know how disrespectful it is for you to not open the door for the elderly, and you're just letting them stand outside in the cold? Yeah, it's disrespectful. But my mom said, hell no, I'm calling my husband. She called my dad. And my dad said, let them in, I'll be there in 5 minutes. Now I'm in my room. I said, Ya Allah, I'm praying. I went to go pray my 2 rakat. And then I made dua. I said, Ya Allah, don't let this happen to me. They come in, and then my dad comes home. And then they were all there, and then they start talking. They're trying to convince my dad why he should let me marry and blah blah. The good thing about my dad, once he says no, it's a no. Qiyamah can take place right now. No is a no. Now he left disappointed. He's not happy. He's pissed off now. Then the next day, we're hearing rumors that he's busy telling people that, oh, you know what, it doesn't even matter, I don't care. Anyway, she's not even a virgin anymore. She lost her virginity to a bicycle. 2. Apparently, as a girl, you're not supposed to ride on a bicycle or else you will lose your virginity. Did I care? I don't. I still rode my bicycle. Do you think he gave up? No. That man almost kidnapped me. Hey.
That $10,000 that he owed me, he told me that he needed it for the proposal.
I've been making engagement rings for 10 years, and there's nothing about this story that surprised me. This is my series on Do Not Drag That Man to the Altar, and basically this woman's boyfriend said that he wanted to propose to her, so she went ahead and spent $10,000 on a wedding venue, did the cake tasting. I'm pretty sure she bought a wedding dress, booked an entire bachelorette trip, hired a videographer, photographer, the whole shebang, and the guy never ended up proposing. And unfortunately, I have literally seen this happen more times than I'd like to admit. Eventually, she met another guy, got married, and starting a family, and everything ended up working out for her. But she's telling her story as a cautionary tale to women to basically just stay present when it comes to any stage of dating, and I could not agree more. Although I'm not going to go into specific story times of clients that I've worked with, unfortunately, I have been in the same position where, as a jeweler, I've had to break it to women that there is no engagement ring being made. And that's exactly how she found out that he had no intention of proposing after 20-something, $30,000, something like that. She does a grand total of how much this entire thing cost her, where she eventually just reaches out to the jeweler, and the jeweler had to break it to her that, like, this man ghosted her and there was never a ring being made. And I have had to break that same news to women sometimes. When I was first starting out my career, there was this 70-something-year-old man he's probably 80 now, that has been making engagement rings for forever, since like the 1960s. And he told me on my first day that there are men that will go to no extent to play in a woman's face, and thus playing in your face. He said men have been faking proposals since 1965 and will continue to do so for the rest of time. Not really sure what the motivation behind that is, but all I have to say is that when you're falling in love, it's so exciting, but it's also important to stay vigilant and not get too ahead of yourself, because there are men that will go to no extent to play in your face.